My name is Bill Thompson. I work in the Exchange Product Group, or the Forefront Online Protection for Exchange part of the Exchange Product Group. I'm a program manager. Even though I'm inside of FOPI now, I'm still an Exchange transport guy by heart. So hub servers, edge servers, mailbox transport, getting all that together is what I typically focus on. But today we're going to talk about using FOPI and Exchange together in some of the advanced routing scenarios that you can use FOPI and Exchange together to implement. How many people out there use FOPI today? Okay, that's about half the room. How many of you have ever used FOPI before? Forefront Online Protection. Besides the half in the room that use it currently. Well, as we go towards Office 365, and we'll talk about this in a minute, Office 365 is fronted completely by FOPI. So every Office 365 customer will have FOPI as their perimeter network. And if you have an existing Exchange Online implementation, you will connect with FOPI to the Exchange Online deployment. And we'll go through some of the different scenarios. So first, I'll give an overview of FOPI, what FOPI is, what it does for you, some of the different services we offer. Talk about the new FOPI connectors. So we added this new feature, FOPI connectors, that allow you to have advanced routing control over your email. And we'll go through some of those scenarios. Forced TLS, outbound smart host, inbound safe listing, a fully hosted scenario, and then we'll talk about shared address space. So sharing an address space between your on-prem deployment and your Exchange Online deployment. Both for if you're an existing FOPI customer and if you're going to be a new Exchange Online customer. Those of you who have FOPI today, do you use connectors at all? Has anybody ever configured a FOPI connector? No. Okay. So we'll go through the process of configuring the connectors as well in a demo. I'm going to do a live demo with the Office 365 tenant who has FOPI and connects with their Exchange on-premise deployment. And I'll show mail routing between the two. And it's a live demo, so hopefully everything goes well with that. So an overview of FOPI. So Forefront Online Protection for Exchange offers a few different features for protecting your perimeter. So it's meant to sit in front of your Exchange organization and protect your mail that comes inbound and goes outbound for your Exchange deployment. It offers connection filtering, so connection analysis, IP block listing, reputation analysis. We have our own in-house, kind of an in-house RBL where we maintain a list of known bad senders, known good senders. We use third-party as well to give input into the connection filtering. And in this, it aggregates all these different providers together and does connection filtering on the edge. We also have antivirus. So we have a multiple engine support for antivirus. We use 3 different antivirus engines that scan all inbound mail and all outbound mail. Tries to decide if they're antivirus or not before forwarding on to the rest of FOPI and either to your on-premise environment or the Exchange Online deployment. We have full anti-spam protection as well. So anti-spam will filter spam. We all probably pretty familiar with what anti-spam is, but we also have NDR backscatter support as well, so we can detect if NDRs are valid or not, decide if there's a spam attack or not, and filter out. And then we also have policy enforcement. So policies are similar to a transport rule, if you guys know Exchange. You can set different policies or different enforcements for a set of users or domains, which you want to have different settings for, or you can force encryption for. You can do all these different settings with the policies. And it's like I said, it's similar to transport rules, but it is not transport rules. It's its own FOPI implementation. And because the room is so small, I mean, if there's any questions throughout the whole presentation, feel free to ask them. If you have questions about policy, antivirus, anti-spam, connection filtering, feel free to interrupt me. So FOPI is available at a few different environments. So FOPI is, as I stated before, it's an Office 365 part of the Office 365 service. So every Office 365 customer is a FOPI customer. We'll go through the different SKUs or the different offerings with Exchange Online and Office 365 and show the different features they have depending on the offering, but every Office 365 customer has FOPI. FOPI is also available as a standalone product, so it can protect your on-premise or hosted email. You can do different things depending on what you're syncing into the cloud or not for the standalone offering. But it doesn't really have to be Exchange that you use for your on-premise deployment. It could be Lotus Notes, and you can still use FOPI as your perimeter service. Hybrid protection, so that's where if we link Exchange Online or Office 365 with your on-prem deployment, so FOPI could be used as the infrastructure that sits between the two environments, and then it's also the front end for other deployments such as the Live EDU. So our Live EDU deployment, which is our schools, we have hosted in Exchange Online. FOPI is also the front end for them. A note about the standalone offering is every enterprise eCal has a FOPI license. So a lot of enterprise customers don't necessarily use FOPI even though they have a license for it. But with the standalone offering, every eCal gets access to FOPI. So a little bit more detail on the FOPI infrastructure. So on the left-hand side, we have the internet or external senders. In the middle, we have the FOPI infrastructure. And on the right-hand side, we have the corporate network. The corporate network could also be Exchange Online or Office 365. So as mail comes in and outbound, we have different configurations or different protection layers as the mail comes in and out. So if the mail comes in on the top red arrow, we have connection analysis that will look at that IP, decide if it's a good IP, a bad IP, apply different logic to it. We have reputation analysis, and we have directory-based edge blocking as well. So we can have we can import a directory into FOPI, and you can decide to block mail or not block mail. Then it hits inside of FOPI. So once it's past our edge blocking, it gets the first top layer of the FOPI protection stack, which is the antivirus. We'll go ahead and filter out any email, make sure it doesn't have any virus. We have different SLAs associated with each one of these as well. So the FOPI infrastructure is actually a global infrastructure. So the center stack doesn't represent one data center. There's many data centers. And we have a 99.999% uptime guarantee for our FOPI data centers. That's SLA for both Exchange Online, standalone customers, it doesn't matter. So we actually will protect the mail even if a data center goes down. We have global redirection that will detect if the data center is down, go ahead and route the mail where it needs to go. With our antivirus, we have 100% coverage of all known viruses that will scan and protect them. And we block about 98% of all known spam. So we'll block 98% before it ever comes in. Then that mail will get passed to the corporate network. So the corporate network, as I stated, can be Exchange Online. It can be an on-premise deployment. It doesn't really matter. We have mechanisms that sync information into FOPI, such as the messaging administrator or different employees. The messaging administrator is obvious. They need access to the administrative console inside of FOPI. And we actually even offer end-user quarantine inside of FOPI as well. So you can sync recipients up into FOPI, and we can store that quarantine mail inside of FOPI and allow the end users to get access to it. Similar, it doesn't work with the junk mail folder. It's just a similar type of infrastructure to junk mail folder. Question?
Will they get daily quarantine summaries or notifications?
The question is will they get daily notifications or summaries about mail that's inside the quarantine? And yes, they get notifications. They get a notification to their email, and it gives them a little link that they can go access the quarantine folder. Now, quarantining is a feature that not everybody has. You have to either you have it and you can enable it, or you may not even have it. So, for example, our Office 365 customers, we don't have quarantine because we rely on junk mail. So in the same way that Outlook junk mail works today, it'll work in the same way if you go to Office 365 or a hybrid scenario where you're Office 365 and on-premise. So you'll just have your junk mail because that's what on-premise users are typically used to. So when we migrate them over, we don't want to introduce this new thing. Question?
There are a lot of different techniques that are used to control spam. The idea that spam will fall into this quarantine is but you use some techniques that reject the message out of the essence before you get there. Is there anything that's rejected that doesn't get in your quarantine?
So the question is the quarantine gives access to mail that you've already accepted via an SMTP conversation, and do we have a mechanism where we actually block the mail before? Would we ever block, like if it's an obvious spam, do we block it at the end before it ever comes in? And the answer is yes, we do. So that's correct. Yeah, it's 98% of all. Yeah, I think where you're going is the quarantine exists to protect against false positives, right? But there is what a portion of mail could be a false positive that will never get into that quarantine because you've blocked it at the edge. What the question is, what percentage or what kind of mail is going to be blocked? And it's just going to be the most obvious of spam. It's based upon content, correct? What do you don't want it to be based upon content?
Well, I want the option of making all mail available to the user in quarantine.
Yeah, that's another one. So I got a couple of my colleagues in the front row too, if they want to pipe in.
So consider a scenario where a mail is intended for a user which doesn't exist in the system. I accept that. So that's a protocol level reset.
That's right.
Right.
Okay, but what about a scenario where it sends 5 users in one of those type of how sensitive is your per heart? One user who's not using enough to block mail,
So mail for that user could be blocked. Yes, which doesn't exist in the directory lookup.
suppose there's a message addressed to 5 users.
Message goes through. But for that,
But some of those users don't.
yes, it would be delivered to those users.
Just to those.
Yeah.
And the second example is IP-based reputation blocking. So if the IP has lost reputation and is known to be a known spammer, right? We block based on that IP address. That is again,
But you don't let those go into quarantine.
we don't let those go into
It's
quarantine.
not a common occurrence, but it does happen from time to time when our customers has some business that they correspond with that has
Yep.
themselves on our mail.
So the scenario there is what, and we'll actually cover this. So we'll cover a scenario like that as one of the custom connectors that you can create. And the scenario that was brought up is, what if I have a business partner I communicate with all the time, or some of my customers do, some of my mail users do, and that mail is being blocked, or maybe they've been put on a block list. And that is actually one of the scenarios that we're going to talk about, because with the new FOPI connectors, you can safe list that sender. You can safe list that whole IP address. It doesn't matter what it is. You can have different various controls you can have. And we'll talk about that scenario when we get to it, but that would be one way to go around that. If your end users have reported that all mail is being blocked, or hey, this business partner, maybe it's my medical partner, is blocking all, or has been blocklisted, you can go safe list them yourself. So we have IP safe listing and user IP safe listing.
But the customer won't actually know because they won't see the mail. They'll have to go through a fairly
Yeah, there'll have to be some sort of escalation. That's correct. We can follow up more offline after the talk. We can talk about the scenario a little bit more. And so I don't remember where I was, but I think that's pretty much all the major features of forefront online protection for Exchange. So what's new with FOPI? And we've already touched on the first one. So we've added a new feature called FOPI connectors. We call them connectors, but they are not the same as a send and receive connector that we're all probably familiar with inside of Exchange. In Exchange, we have send connectors, we have receive connectors. So these are actually customer configured connectors that exist inside the FOPI service. They are for both standalone FOPI customers and Exchange Online FOPI customers. So you can control how mail is going to go in and out of the FOPI system and the Exchange Online system, and you can control, you can force different security settings on that and where it goes, and we'll go through the scenarios as well. We have skip IP address filtering as well, and this is the scenario that I touched on a second ago. So you can actually add IPs as a safe list for just your customer, for just yourself. We have different TLS options, so we can now give the ability to force TLS either in or outbound inside of for FOPI. So say you're an on-prem customer and you want to communicate with your, maybe you have Aetna and you want to make sure, or you send a lot of mail back and forth with Aetna, they're a medical provider, and you want to ensure that that mail is protected, you can set up connectors that force TLS. And if TLS fails, the mail won't go. And we'll talk more on that scenario in a minute. We also have single sign-on to the FOPI Admin Center from Exchange Control Panel. So if you're an Office 365 or an Exchange Online customer, to access the FOPI Admin Center, you can do that now directly through the Exchange Control Panel. And I'll show you that in the demo as well. And then delegated admin experience. So we allow third parties to manage FOPI for an organization. So it can be like a reseller scenario, where a reseller decides to offer FOPI to their set of customers, or maybe you're a hosted organization who has many different types of customers. You can actually have delegated admin experience inside of FOPI now, where you could have the reseller admin that has control over all the various customers, and then the customers have only a limited set of FOPI administrative access. So some of the different features, I won't go through every one of the bullets, but these are the different FOPI UI and feature separations depending on what SKU the customer has or what Exchange offering you would have. A couple of interesting ones to note out is if you are a FOPI standalone customer or an Office 365 beta for enterprise or education, you have FOPI Admin Center access. But one of the new offerings that's coming out is Office 365 for small business, and they do not have FOPI Admin Center access. So what does that mean? Well, the things like connectors, which we're going to go through, if you don't have FOPI Admin Center access, it means you can't create connectors. So if you need to have advanced routing, you need to be a Office 365 enterprise or education customer. Then you can go directly into the Exchange Control Panel and configure any connectors you need. Live at EDU, that's the schools offering that we have going on in Exchange Online now. They have Admin Center access, and then the other two are the BPOS offerings. Has anybody had any experience with the current BPOS offerings? A couple people. So they do have various different ways to get into FOPI or not. All of them, except for Office 365 professionals and small business, have the ability to sync recipients into FOPI as well. That's the right-hand column. So you can actually sync in certain recipients or groups into FOPI and do various features based upon that group membership if you wanted to. Hybrid messaging protection. So that's just to refer to the FOPI and Forefront Protection 2010 for Exchange Server, or FPE, are meant to work together. And they work together really well, especially in the Exchange Online offering. So Forefront Online Protection for Exchange, or FOPI, is meant to protect the perimeter. That only protects mail coming in and out of the organization. FOPI Protection for Exchange Server, FPE, is meant to protect all internal mail. And in Exchange Online, we actually don't use FOPI for virus scanning. We only use FPE for virus scanning. Question? So the question is in Office 365, what does it mean to say that it does not have Admin Center access? And it's only, so Office 365 has a few different offerings. We have Office 365 for enterprise and Office 365 small business. So small business is meant for small businesses that have very, very small amount of employees. I don't remember what the current limit is or what it's going to be, but it's not meant for large enterprises, so it's assumed that they don't have these advanced routing requirements. So they do not have FOPI Admin Center access. Whereas a FOPI or an Exchange 365 customer, enterprise customer, which is the third row, has Admin Center access. So there's a difference there with the offerings. The second row is for professionals and small business, and the third row is for enterprise. So Office 365 Enterprise do have Admin Center access. Did you have something to add?
I just wanted to say that for small businesses, the thinking is that the policies that they need are created by the Office 365 team, and if they want additional control, they need to move up by the enterprise team. The same set of policies are applied to all small businesses. So they do have policies, but it's created by.
Yeah, it's a overall global type of setting. Yeah.
That apply to all small businesses.
Question. Oh, okay. The question is for FOPI standalone, it says yes for certain scenarios under FOPI connectors. So the certain scenarios would be ones that don't involve on-premise coexistence with Exchange Online. Because if you're a FOPI standalone customer, you don't need to coexist with. So the certain scenarios are all the ones that don't involve enterprise. Yep, all those other ones still apply. Correct. You asked if TLS and those things still apply to IP safe listing. All those things still apply to standalone customers. So FOPI connectors. We'll spend the rest of the time talking about FOPI connectors. So what FOPI connectors are is it's the building block to allow the control over different stages of the message flow. So you can control the connection, which is the first step, who's allowed to send to you, where you want it to go, if it's the right people sending to you, the security involved with that connection, what kind of security do you want to have over the messages coming inbound or outbound, and then the filtering that you want to apply. And we'll go through the different inbound and outbound on the next slide. So say you want to set up a business-to-business secure communication, and you want to ensure that all the connections come from a specific IP address. You can do that with FOPI connectors. Or you want to force the inbound TLS or outbound TLS. You can do that with FOPI connectors. One of the big differences, or the reasons we have created the FOPI connectors as well, is to give a difference between content-based policies, or any of the FOPI policies that exist today, and edge block policies. So the example, or what that it's intending to explain is that if, say, you have a policy that says, hey, all mail inbound should be encrypted from this host, you can create a FOPI policy like that. But let's say that they are getting blocked, or they're not even being accepted on the edge. So the policy is useless if the mail is being blocked. So now adding a connector will allow you to say, hey, allow all this mail to come in from this host, force it to be TLS encrypted, and then go through. So that's why there's a separation between the policies that you actually have and the inbound connection or outbound connection. And then also it enables the hybrid deployments. So that's cross-premise coexistence with hosted mailboxes. So anytime you see hybrid, and we'll talk about hybrid now, or coexistence, or on-premise, it just is meant to reflect where you have a portion of your mailboxes on-prem and a portion of your mailboxes in the cloud. So hybrid is the new word. In SV2, they're coming out with a hybrid coexistence wizard, so that's what that means. It's just to configure some of your mailboxes in the cloud, some of them on-premise. Question?
Why is there only enhanced outbound TLS and not an option for force?
So the question is, why does it say enhanced outbound TLS and not enforced? So we can force outbound TLS as well. There's a few different options for outbound versus inbound. So outbound is more enhanced than inbound. So enhanced is just, it's a misnomer. We can force outbound, you can force inbound. You have a little bit more options on outbound, and we'll show you on the connector as well, the different options. So the FOPI connection architecture. So you have two types of connectors, inbound connectors and outbound connectors. The connectors, the in or the out, always refers to the FOPI environment, and if it's from or to your own domains that are configured. It gets really, really confusing if you're a current FOPI customer and you want to go to Exchange Online, and you can have an inbound connector that's for your Exchange on-premise deployment and an inbound connector that's for your Office 365 deployment. So it's the directionality is just meant to refer to mail that's coming in or out of that FOPI instance for your domains. So inbound, we have connection, security, and filtering. So you can specify source IP. So you can say, hey, I only want the mail to come from this set of source IPs. You can have source domains. Say, from this IPs, I only want to see mail for these domains. So if it comes from that IP and is not for the same domain you've configured, don't accept it. That's one of the options you have. And then reject on non-source IP. So say if you get mail for, using that business partner example I said before, Aetna. If you get mail for Aetna, but it's not from the IP that you said mail from Aetna should come on, you can block it. Don't even accept it. So then, once it passes all connection filtering, then it goes into security. So you can force TLS or do opportunistic TLS as well. So that's where if it sees TLS is available, it'll go ahead and try to do it, but if it fails, no big deal, you'll still accept the mail. Force TLS says, force that TLS connection, and if it fails, don't accept the mail. And then once it passes all those, it gets into the filtering. So we do the connection filtering, spam filtering and policy filtering on that. So you can actually configure inbound mail to skip spam filtering, to skip connection filtering, and to skip any policy filtering for those domains. So first it's got to pass that the IPs are correct. Then it's got to pass that the domains are correct. And then if there's any forced TLS on it, it's got to pass that. And then it will get into what parts of FOPI should it skip. So it could skip the filtering, the connection filtering, which obviously if you said, hey, trust all mail from this IP, go ahead and skip connection filtering. Then spam, and then policy. For outbound, this is any mail that's sent from your domain, so it has a similar thing. It's connection, security, and delivery. So you can configure that outbound connector to say, hey, all mail for these domains go through these IP addresses. You can then say, I want to force TLS or not force TLS, and then you can configure what kind of delivery you want to do. What kind of resolution do you want to do? Do you want to use DNS to route to this host, or do you want to use smart host routing? So for outbound, you can choose, and this is part of the enhanced, you can actually choose to have a few different options. The way it used to work with FOPI is it had to be a valid CA cert. It had to be one I could go check. So if I'm connecting outbound and I'm trying to send mail to Contoso.com had to have a valid CA cert. And if it didn't, then I would fail. Well, a lot of Exchange deployments just use self-signed certs, or maybe the names don't match. So now you have a few different options. And this was what the enhanced TLS for outbound connectors was referring to. Now you can do forced CA, so it's got to be a valid CA cert, or it could be a self-signed cert. You could also have different domains. So you could say, hey, even though I'm sending to Contoso.com, if the cert, maybe the Contoso.com is hosted on Postini, and if the cert says it's a Postini cert, then that's good enough. So even though the recipient domain doesn't match the cert domain, I've said what the cert domain should be, and it'll match. And also with non-valid CA as well. So I could just say, hey, any cert will work. Doesn't matter. That's new for FOPI 11.1. So the connectors work by doing this thing called attribution. So attribution looks at where the mail is coming from. Is it coming from Exchange Online? Is it going to the on-prem? Is it going to the internet? It'll find the right connectors. So it'll say, hey, what's the IPs? What are the connectors? It will then look at the connector and apply any configuration based upon that. And it does that right after the first receipt to command. So the receipt to command will look at, hey, who's this mail going to? Where is it coming from? And apply it. And then it adds this attribution header to the message so you can see where it came from and where it's going. And then every component inside of FOPI will use that header to decide if it should skip certain settings or not. And we'll go into the scenario with cross-prem, where the whole reason to do a cross-prem or set up an advanced cross-prem deployment is so you can actually make the mail look like it's internal. And those headers will be added inside of there and not be filtered out of the FOPI environment as well. And we'll go through that scenario in a minute. So there's a few different scenarios that we allow. We've already talked about the forced TLS, so we won't go through that. We'll show you the different scenarios in a sec. Then we have outbound smart hosts. So you can actually redirect some of your mail to a specific host or not. You don't have to just use DNS routing. You can force additional filtering on that or not. And then inbound safe listing, and we already touched on that as well. So you can say, hey, mail from my safe list, or mail from these IP addresses, I want to trust them. Let's go ahead and skip any connection filtering. Let's go ahead and skip any other any. That's correct. So the question is, can you safe list by sender, email address, and IP? And what? So the question is, can you do per user? So no, you can't use per user. We'll go through the inbound safe listing scenario in 3 slides. So I don't want to jump ahead too far. So the forced TLS. Forced TLS, you would create an inbound connector to say, hey, all email from this business partner, go ahead and trust. You could set it to either do opportunistic or forced TLS that we talked about before. So opportunistic TLS is always enabled. So anytime you send email in and out of FOPI, it will actually try. This is the same way Exchange will do. Exchange will always try and force TLS. Exchange 2010, at least, will try and force TLS. So it doesn't require any, or it will always try TLS, and if TLS fails, it'll just go through regular mail. So you don't actually even have to configure that. If you want to force TLS, then you have to configure that as manually. So when it's exchange on, or if it's an on-prem customer, in this example, the mail would come in that inbound connector, go through the FOPI, edge filtering, virus filtering, policy filtering, spam filtering, and then be routed to the on-prem environment in the mailboxes for contoso.com. Outbound mail, same thing. It will go from the on-prem environment, and you can configure that message communication between on-prem environment and FOPI to be encrypted, and then FOPI will force that connection on the outbound. This question in the back? So the question is from OA, or Outlook Web Access, or web application. Do you do any virus scanning or protection for internal mail? Is that an on-premise deployment, or are you talking for Office 365? So the question is if I'm an on-premise customer and I have my on-premise deployment, I'm using OA to log into my on-premise environment, and I attach a potentially virus-laden email, how is that filtered? So there's, I break that up into two parts. One is if I'm sending to internal recipients filtered versus external recipients. And if it's an internal recipient, it would rely on whatever the on-premise virus filtering is. So I would hope it to be FOPI, or FPE, or FOPI Protection for Exchange, which is installed on the Exchange servers. So the FPE, and that was that hybrid message protection slide that showed FPE and FOPI coexisting together. So all internal mail still needs to be protected by an on-premise virus filtering, such as Forefront Protection for Exchange. You can install it on the hub transport, correct. I think FPE also can go on a mailbox server as well. It can. So you can protect mail on the mailbox server as well. So if, say, you want to protect drafts uploaded or things like that, or just on the hub transport server, so anytime mail is sent. Because as you know, mail has to go through a hub transport before it's ever delivered to a mailbox. So if you have it running on a hub transport, it's going to protect all mail in transit. Well, for the Microsoft product is Forefront Protection for Exchange, or FPE. And yeah, after the class or after this, we can sync up and give you the room that talks about on-premise virus protection. Now the second part of the question was how is that mail protected when sending externally? So mail, when it routes through FOPI, will be virus scanned and spam scanned as well. So external mail will be protected double, assuming you have an on-premise virus protection, which you should. I mean, you should all, even if you have FOPI, right? You want to have an on-premise virus protection to protect your internal mail. But even though it's been scanned there, when we send it outbound to FOPI, FOPI is going to scan it again, using its own engines. Yeah. So the forced TLS scenario, we've covered that. Any questions around forced TLS? Okay. So outbound smart host scenario. So one of the big scenarios is, especially when we start bringing people into the cloud or onto Office 365, or just a FOPI standalone customer, if you want to force your mail to go outbound through a third party, such as a DLP provider or an encryption provider, you can actually still have FOPI as your perimeter service, and FOPI can then route all of your outbound mail to this third-party protector or third-party environment. So in this example, we have a DLP appliance on the right-hand side that I want all my outbound mail to go through. So FOPI will route all that outbound mail to that custom mail system for processing and then delivery. So it'll still do virus scanning, spam scanning, everything else inside of FOPI, and then you can route all of your outbound mail to that outbound source. So if, say, you wanted, let's say you were using address rewriting. Nobody ever seems to be to use address rewriting in Exchange, but let's say you did. Well, address rewriting is not one of the features that we offer inside of Exchange Online. So you could actually say, well, I want to have address rewriting, and I have this third party or service that can do it for me. You can then route all of your outbound mail to that third party before it gets processed to the internet. And this is similar to the on-premise deployment. If you're a current FOPI customer, you can force this to happen as well, which we'll talk about. So you use connectors to do this. So you'd have an outbound connector that would force mail from asterisk or mail from my domains, which are, in this case, their sender is contoso.com, who's on the bottom. You can say all mail from contoso.com to asterisk, meaning all domains on the internet, I want to route to this host. And it would take that connector. In the inbound safe listing scenario, this is again where contoso.com is the on-premise environment, and you want to trust all inbound mail. So you can create an inbound connector that says, hey, all mail from these hosts, from these IP addresses, go ahead and skip spam scanning, connection filtering, any policies. So it doesn't matter even if the host has been blocklisted, you can add them as a safe inbound IP address. And this only applies to you. It doesn't apply to all the other FOPI customers. It's only mail for your domain. And that's going back to the attribution, or look, who's the mail being sent to? Who's it coming from? Let's find a connector that it is to associate it with and apply all policies on that. So this doesn't take any input from like Outlook safe senders or anything like that. So if someone tries to add a safe sender in Outlook, does it get synced up to here? It doesn't do that. This is an IP-based allow it or not allow it. The question is, am I going to show where to configure this? And yeah, I can show you. It'll be on the connectors. We show these different scenarios, and we say we can break them up. Like we want to force TLS, or we want to IP safe list somebody. But in the ultimate scenario, which is the on-prem Exchange 365 or Office 365 coexistence, you actually start mixing all of these scenarios together because you want to allow all mail from these IPs to come in and skip this safe listing or skip any connection filtering. And then you want to force TLS with it so you can trust it. And I'll show you they all overlap each other when the ultimate scenario, which is the cross-premise coexistence. And I'm going to demo that for you. Was there another question?
Yeah, so can there be multiple inbound and outbound connectors then, each with different rule sets?
Yeah, the question was, can I have multiple inbound and outbound connectors? Yes, you can have, I don't know what the theoretical limit is, but you can have as many as you want. You can have many inbounds, many outbounds. If they overlap, there's a problem. So if you say, hey, I want all my mail for bill.com to route through this connector, and then all my mail from bill.com to route through this connector, you can't do that, of course. But as long as there's a difference between where you're sending to, you can have as many as you want.
Would there be a precedence then? Like, would it go down the list somehow? We probably have a lot of connectors.
The question is there...
Screw something up.
Yeah, what's the precedent order if you have multiple connectors that conflict? And I think they're just in order of listed, but I'll verify that. I'm being told there's no precedent, so yeah, that's why I wanted to verify, because I didn't think there was any.
There is reporting on connectors, and you can see which connector got hit from that person. So you can see the connector ID that is getting hit from that connector, and then you can associate that, okay, I made connector number 100, but it's 145 that's getting hit. That's something wrong.
But then if it's just reporting, could it potentially hit one, in the same scenario, get one connector from one message, but hit another connector?
It is one.
Or okay.
So that's one of the feature requests.
Yeah, as it was. So the question is, there's no way to have like some automated, or your only way to know that you had multiple connectors being used is do some reporting, and it'll show that both are being used. And so yeah, we've taken it as a feature request to show as being told. So yeah, but to answer the original question, you have multiple connectors. So those are the standalone scenarios, and now we'll talk about some where if you have Office 365. So the fully hosted scenario is all your mailboxes are in the cloud. Then we'll go through where you're in a hybrid scenario where you have some of your mailboxes in the cloud, some of them on-premise, and you're a current FOPI customer. Then we'll have shared address space. So that's where your MX records do point to FOPI. So all your email is coming in and out of FOPI for your current on-premise deployment, and you've decided to add Office 365 to coexist. Then we'll have the third scenario there, which is you're not a current FOPI customer, and you're going to keep your MX records pointed to yourself, but you want to add some Office 365 mailboxes. So how to configure that with the connectors. And then if you're not a current FOPI customer, but you're going to migrate to Office 365, or you want to start using FOPI as your perimeter service, so you're going to move your MX records to point to FOPI. That's the fourth scenario there. And we'll go through each one of these, and then the fourth scenario I'll demo for you. So fully hosted, inbound and outbound. So Contoso.com is our hosted environment, and inbound mail is coming from Fabricam.com. So it doesn't require any additional configuration to make this happen. This is just an Office 365 mail. You don't have to configure any special connectors at all. Once the tenant is provisioned inside of Exchange Online, it'll be synced to FOPI. FOPI will be fully aware of it. So all inbound mail hits FOPI. FOPI will apply any filtering that you've configured. The difference between the previous slides and this one, the virus is black, meaning it's not being used, it's being skipped. So virus protection inside of FOPI for an Exchange Online customer, virus filtering does not happen inside of FOPI. It happens inside of Exchange Online. So we knew, because it's ourselves, we didn't want to be filtering in both places. It would be a waste of resources to filter in both places, so we picked one or the other. We do it inside of Exchange Online. So we do all virus scanning is performed by FPE for Exchange Online. And then finally, the mail is delivered to the recipient. So the edge blocking, the virus or the policy and the spam, you can configure on a per domain or per feature basis as well for just fully hosted. So outbound, the mail just goes in the reverse path. So outbound to from Contoso.com to Fabricam.com, route to FOPI. FOPI will then do any of the filtering that's been configured and then route it outbound. So it's a simple scenario, inbound and outbound. So the next, now we get into more kind of complicated. This is if you're a current FOPI customer and you want to configure some of your mailboxes inbound and outbound. So your MX records point to FOPI currently, and all of your mail routes to the on-premise deployment. It relies on the on-premise deployment to figure out where the mailbox really resides. Is it local to me, or is it in Office 365? So to have the intelligence there, if you want the directories to appear and be synced, you have to have some directory sync between on-premise and Office 365, which we won't go into now, but that's required for the directories to be in sync. For just the mail routing to work, doesn't require directory sync. So if the old internal relay domain, if say this on-premise deployment, you could configure all your domains as internal relay, and it'll go out. But if you don't want it to force mail loops to happen, you want to be authoritative, you want DirSync to work, you want gals to be in check, then it requires directory synchronization. And that's not between FOPI and your on-premise deployment. That's between Exchange Online and your on-premise deployment. So the MX records point to FOPI. FOPI will receive the mail. It's already been configured to route all mail to the on-premise system after it does its scanning. So it'll do that. It'll go ahead and send it to the Exchange or the on-premise receive connector. Note, there's no FOPI connectors that have been configured, right? If you're an on-premise customer, you don't have to configure a connector to get the mail to you. So we're not even using connectors yet inside of FOPI. The mail will be processed by on-premise Exchange, decide where the recipient lives, if he's in the cloud or not, and forward that mail using an outbound send connector inside of Exchange Online. But on the FOPI side, we have that inbound connector. So the inbound connector in this scenario says all mail from my on-premise environment, go ahead and let's skip spam scanning, skip IP filtering, skip any policies, because you don't want to spam filter mail between your on-premise deployment and your Office 365 deployment, just like you don't probably scan internal mail today. You know, one user sending to another user on-prem probably doesn't get spam filtered. So you can have that same policies or same filtering, the skipping of filtering applied to the on-premise. But you can actually configure that if you want to. We give you the option to turn on spam filtering if you want to protect it between your on-premise environment. So depending on, question?
This requires configuration of policies.
It requires configuration of the connectors inside of FOPI. So that's, yeah, so the question is can I make this configuration work if I'm an Office 365 small business customer? And the answer is no, because you don't have admin center access. So even though it doesn't really matter the size of your company, if you require rich coexistence and FOPI connectors, then you have to be an Office 365 enterprise customer. And the question is, does that the same for IP whitelisting? And the answer is yes. Basically, any feature that requires admin center access, which is a customer or whoever the FOPI customer is, logging into admin center and creating these connectors or creating these policies, requires Office 365 Enterprise. Yeah, the question is, maybe I made some confusion in what I was saying was offered inside of Exchange Online versus the FOPI Admin Center access. I don't know what, I guess a blanket rule, just any time that you need to log into Admin Center and you want to create FOPI-specific filtering, policies, or connectors requires Office 365 Enterprise. That's correct. Any type of IP-based whitelisting requires FOPI admin. So Exchange Online still has safe senders. It still has block senders, end user block senders, safe senders, tenant controlled safe senders, block senders. So we still have the ability to do that even if you're an Office 365 small business customer. You just don't have the ability to completely whitelist an IP address because that requires it to be on the edge block. Remember we talked about the edge blocking before? Anything that's connection-based, IP-based, has to be as far out as it can be to let it in, or else it could possibly be blocked. So you have to be able to get it all the way out. And so to get it all the way out there requires the FOPI access, requires admin center access. And I could follow up with you offline to give you more information about the SKU offerings or the different Office 365 offerings. So that's the inbound mail flow. So for the outbound mail flow, this is if mail originates inside of Office 365, down on the bottom there. All mail will be routed outbound to the FOPI system. The FOPI system can have filtering or not filtering. It's up to you. And then it will use that outbound FOPI connector to route all mail back to the on-premise system, where you could have any additional filtering, any mailboxes, anything else you want. And then remember, this is if you're a FOPI standalone customer currently. So then that mail is going to actually route back to FOPI, back out to the internet. So in this example, you're using your on-premise environment to be like the master kind of directory, the master mail processor. You can, this is if you want all your mail, or if you want to maintain that current FOPI existence that you have. When we talk about if you're not a current FOPI customer, you don't have to have all your mail outbound routed through the on-prem system or not. This is just that you've decided that FOPI is your provider. You want them to maintain your external presence. You want them to handle if they get blacklisted or not, because there's the FOPI offering is more than just all this filtering and spam stuff, but outbound protection as well. So FOPI has systems built into it that say, that will monitor if they get blocklisted and how to take themselves off blocklisting, or if the mail looks like spam, it routes out a different set of IP addresses, even the normal mail. So FOPI has logic inside of it that says, hey, I want to protect this service and all my customers. So that's the other kind of big value add of FOPI, which is in this example why this on-premise environment is routing all of its mail back out to FOPI, because they want to let FOPI handle all that. If FOPI gets blocklisted, let FOPI take care of getting it off the blocklisted. I don't have to worry about it myself.
What about if there is detected spam that's going out? Will the local or the Office 365 or on-premise Exchange admin apply?
So the question is if it doesn't really matter who's sending the mail, if the Exchange Online or an on-premise user is sending mail that appears to be spam and FOPI thinks it's spam, will it have any feedback mechanism to the administrator that says, hey, you're sending spam? There's none that I know of. There's not any notification that I know of. Is there? Can you configure that inside of FOPI?
Concept is a compromised account. So one's ID password were compromised somehow, and all of a sudden the account's being used.
I don't know of any proactive notification. You'd see it in the reporting, or you'd see it in your spam reports, or you'd see it in the inside of FOPI. There's all these reporting. You'd see it there, but I don't know of any proactive.
Because of that internal customer sending, let's say a botnet took care of that computer and it's sending spam. So very soon, either copy itself will be blacklisted by some other provider, and we will know about it, or we will determine that you're sending more than so a certain threshold of messages per hour, per day, per minute, because of which we will start sending mail through a different pool, higher delivery,
Yep.
as opposed to the regular pool. And then even after sending it through high this delivery pool, if you haven't stopped sending it, then we will notify the owner saying that, hey, your IP is sending, maybe you're taken control of by the botnet, because of which you may have to stop sending. So, but there is no such, there is no proactive.
Yeah, there's no proactive.
Reactive,
Yeah.
because we have to find out
Yeah.
how many you have sent and then react.
Yeah, and the go ahead.
Just like inbound, there is spam filtering on outbound as well, and it's a rule based. When the threshold exceeds, we do get flagged, and it goes via the virus delivery pool, and we monitor the virus delivery pool more frequently, and we care about that more frequently because that's going to block copy.
It's all reactive.
Yeah, and both, one thing that Sri touched on is both FOPI and Exchange Online have throttling limits to how much mail can be sent over a period of time, or how quickly they can be sent, not only in a 24-hour time, but like how many even per minute can come in. So we have some protections there to prevent if a machine's been compromised and sends lots of mail, or if it's, in the example, if it's a ton of spam, we're going to see it. FOPI services are going to be notified about it, and we're going to reach out to you and say, hey, you're sending a lot of spam, what's going on? But it's not an automated type of feedback mechanism. And the limits between FOPI and Exchange Online complement each other as well. So in Exchange Online, we limit how much mail can even be sent per user per day. If anybody's familiar with Exchange throttling, Exchange Online has Exchange throttling built into it. So then that scenario, outbound mail goes to FOPI, goes out to the internet. So then inter-org mail. So this is the on-premise mailboxes sending to the Exchange Online. So we have a sender, Joe Contoso, Bob Contoso, both are on-premise and Microsoft Exchange Online mailboxes. So let's say the hosted mail sends to an on-premise mailbox. It's going to hit the FOPI system. The outbound connector is going to be configured, and it's going to be configured to skip all of these policy rules, virus scanning, spam scanning. That's the little, goes to the side of those, skips them, and then is routed to the on-premise mailbox using that outbound connector. In reverse, it's not, let me go back one. It's not shown via an animation, but the inbound FOPI connector would be if that on-premise user sends to the Exchange Online mailbox. It's going to route via outbound send connector inside of on-premise, hit a FOPI inbound connector. The FOPI inbound is going to be configured to trust all mail from these IPs and these domains, skip all filtering, and then deliver to the on-premise mailbox or Exchange Online mailbox. So we have two kind of major scenarios during migration. So this is migration when you are going to Exchange Online or Office 365. We have two options. So this is if you're not a current FOPI customer and you decide you want to migrate, or at least a portion of your users are going to exist. You have a choice to make. Do you want your MX record still pointed to your on-premise environment or wherever your MX record is pointed currently? Or do you want to move that MX record to FOPI? So there's a couple different reasons why you'd want to do one or the other. The first option is the least disruptive. So say you want to do a pilot phase, you just want to test out some of your mailboxes inside Office 365, and the thought of moving your MX records seems so drastic. Well, you can keep your MX records pointed to your on-prem environment, just have a pilot deployment sitting in Exchange Online. So you can have rich coexistence for both of these. And when we talk about hybrid environments, that rich coexistence is the ability for the mail that's routed between the Exchange Online and on-premise environment will look like it's internal. And I'll show you the message headers in the demo, but we know currently if you send between two Exchange systems, and even though you might have the same directory, it doesn't look like it's internal. The to line is an SMTP address, for example. Like a user doesn't think it's from a real user. If I double click it, I don't see them. Well, with Exchange Online and on-premise environment, if you have that gal sync and you use these connectors to set up that rich coexistence, the mail will look like it's internal. It'll look like it's from a real recipient, even though that recipient's in the cloud. You won't know any difference. You can have free busy configured to show free busy between the on-prem and the hosted mailbox. You can do message tracking to an extent between the environments as well. So that's what the rich coexistence refers to, is just making the mail look internal. And I'll show you in a header exactly how it does that as well. So why you'd want to have your MX record pointed to the cloud, you can actually decide that you want to take advantage of all the services FOPI offers for all of your mail. And so you're going to move over your MX record to point to the FOPI environment. So you're going to just say, hey, FOPI, take care of all my mail. It's going to, basically, in either one of these scenarios, you're deciding where do you want the logic. Where do you want the master directory to be? Do you want it to be in Exchange Online or do you want it to be on-premise? And then each one of those systems would then decide, hey, the mail actually is in the other one. Note that if you do the MX record pointed to the cloud and you want all your mail to be routed through FOPI, but let's say you only have a very small portion of your mail sitting in Exchange Online, it still requires licensing inside of FOPI for all of your users. So it's not a way that you can somehow say put 10 mailboxes inside the cloud but leave my 100,000 on-prem and then I get virus filtering for free. It still requires the FOPI licensing for all those mailboxes. So we'll go through these scenarios. This is if you're an on-premise customer and you've decided to configure mail flow with Exchange Online. So your MX record still points on-prem. You create your outbound send connector for your own domain to route to FOPI. Inside of FOPI, you create an inbound FOPI connector. Mail passes that on-premise system, does any filtering, decides, hey, is the mailbox in Exchange Online or is it on-premise? We'll decide, in this example, it's going to see that the mail is actually on-premise, be routed to FOPI, either skip the filtering or not, and then ultimately deliver to Exchange Online. And then again, the virus scanning still happens in Exchange Online. So even though you've skipped virus scanning, let's say you've configured that inbound connector to skip all scanning, you're still going to get virus scanned in Exchange Online. So for outbound mail, it's the exact opposite, the hosted mail. This is the scenario where your on-premise directory or your MX record still points to your on-premise. And let's say that you didn't want FOPI to send mail outbound to the internet because you didn't want to manage two different places where mail is coming from your environment. Let's say you were really big on sender ID and you didn't want to modify your sender ID to say that FOPI is an allowed sender for you. You can still have all of your outbound mail routed back to on-premise. So you can say all the mail will go from Exchange Online, hit FOPI system. FOPI will look at the outbound connector and then route all of its mail back to on-prem and then route it to the internet. So you could actually configure this to not do it if you wanted. If, say, you wanted all your outbound mail to just go from FOPI directly to the internet, then you just create the outbound connector to not send all mail out the outbound connector, just send the mail for your domains out that way. So if you wanted all mail between the two systems to be routed outbound connector, you just scope the outbound connector. In this example, that outbound connector is just going to have asterisk. It's just going to say, hey, route all mail to this on-premise system. So you have a choice. In this example, we wanted it all. So interorg mail, just like the other scenario where you're a current FOPI customer, MX record is pointed to on-premise, but that doesn't even matter. So we do if the mail originates on-premise, it's going to go out that outbound send connector, hit the inbound connector inside of FOPI, skip all filtering, and deliver to the Exchange Online. So, yeah, so all mail is delivered. So for this, now this scenario is if you change your MX records to point to on-premise to pointing to FOPI. So all of your mail is going in and out of FOPI first. So you're making FOPI decide if the mail resides, if the mailbox resides in the cloud or does it reside on-prem. So it'll hit the FOPI service, it'll do all its scan or all of its filtering and spam scanning for that mail, and then route it Exchange Online. If it doesn't exist, it will route back to FOPI, where the outbound connectors have been configured to route that mail to the on-premise environment. So outbound, the same thing. Mail will originate in the cloud and Exchange Online. route to FOPI, and then route to the internet. And as I stated before, you don't have to have the mail routed directly to the internet. In this example, we do, but you could have the mail routed back to the on-premise system, and all mail go outbound via the on-premise system. The connectors allow you to make whatever decisions you want to make.
Sorry, can you back up one scenario there? Yeah, that one. Is there a way in FOPI that there may be the jurisdiction, something or other, where FOPI can make the routing decision, rather than having to route it all the way into the service, where then it does the AD lookup and says, no, it's actually an on-prem user and sends it.
Yeah, so the question is,
Do that AD lookup and send it directly to on-prem?
yeah, so the question is can FOPI actually do the lookup and decide where that mailbox is, so I can skip routing it to Exchange Online, let the first place that gets the mail decide where it should go or not? And the answer is no, not yet. We don't have the ability to do that today. But if you think about FOPI and Exchange Online as being one service together, and they're right next to each other in the same data centers deployed everywhere, you're not leaving one third party to go to another third party. It's the same systems. I mean, they're not the same servers, but it's the same data centers, it's the same environments, it's the same teams. So it's, even though we're taking on the extra hop.
It's extra hops.
It is extra hops. I won't lie to you, it is extra hops, but we're taking the responsibility of those extra hops on. We as in Microsoft is. So speaking of extra hops, I mean, you see it in the headers, but it's the only place that it would really affect you. So outbound mail, we talked about that. You could choose whether or not you want it to be routed. Interorg, same thing as before. All mail goes to FOPI, decides to skip the filtering or not, goes to the on-premise system. Good to go. So the admin experience, and I'll show you how to get to it, but now we have an integrated admin experience. We have single sign-on. So say you're an Office 365 customer. You don't have to manage a separate way in or out of the two administrative consoles. They are different consoles, but you can get from the Exchange Online or the Exchange Online ECP directly into the FOPI Admin Center, and you can get all the tracing, reporting, everything else you want inside of that. As I mentioned before, we do offer a delegated admin experience, single sign-on, and then inside of FOPI, we offer the reporting and tracking on the different filters, such as spam filtering, virus detection, and email traffic. So I'll demo the FOPI connectors in a live demo. So, okay. It's always a fear of a live demo that somehow you can't connect, but it looks like I can. So in this environment, I have a domain called Bill Dog Food. Bill Dog Food is my on-premise deployment, but I've decided to migrate some of my mailboxes to the cloud. So I've switched my MX record to point to FOPI. So I've created my on-premise, or my on-premise already exists. I created my Office 365 environment as well. So I'll first log into Office 365. Well, I'm going to attempt to. There we go. Okay, so I've logged in my Office 365. And this is the Microsoft Online Services console that you first come into when you're an administrator who's logging into the service. From here, you can configure your domains, your licensing, everything else. But I'll just go right into Outlook. So this is Outlook Web Access. So I'm going to first show you how to get into the FOPI Admin Center. So I'll go into the options, and I can manage myself here, but I want to manage my organization. So this is the same ECP. This is an Office 365 beta tenant right now. This is the same ECP that's available in Exchange with some additional options put into it. So this is where I can administer all my users, do everything else. So I'll go into my domains, and I have the Bill Dog Food is a hosted domain. And then I've created this on-prem.billdogfood for a shared domain. Because the mail will actually, all mail, so from both sides, I have my on-premise and my Exchange Online. All mail that users send is going to appear as though it's from the Bill Dog Food domain. But in order to route the mail between the systems, I just have a secondary email address, or if you guys are familiar with contacts, target addresses. Directory Sync takes care of this for you. It's not, you can make it manual if you want to, but I just have to have a way of saying where the mail should go. So I'll actually go into the FOPI Admin Center now. So I just click on a link, and it's going to take me into FOPI. And here's the FOPI Admin Center. So from here is where I would create the connectors. So I already have some created, so I'll just show you what they look like. So in this case, I've said all this inbound connector, remember it's into the Exchange Online system, is from this on-prem deployment. So I've said my sending domain is myself, so all mail that's coming in, and it must be from this IP address. And then you have the option to safe list it. So you could say, hey, I want to safe list this IP. Now, if I'm using this connector for a cross-prem or hybrid scenario, but this same screen would be used for the inbound safe listing. So say I wanted to protect Aetna. I would just say, hey, all mail from Aetna.com, from these IP addresses, go ahead and safe list them. And then from here is where I could force the TLS settings as well. I could force it or give it opportunistic. I'd want to force it in this case, and I say what certificate name. So this is the certificate subject name of the sender. And this must be a valid cert. I have to be able to trust it.
Those two sound like the same thing. The option above that, add to the safe list before the domain specified, or and only accept before the domains, or accept that's accepted.
Add these, oh, you're saying these two look the same?
It's a little confusing. Where it's the domain you're specifying is the sender.
So, correct. Add these IPs to the safe list for the domain specified above, and then one is, go ahead, Harpreet. That's right.
Double check, make sure it is domain and IP. The first one is you add the IP to the safe list.
You have the option to just add in the domain.
Yes.
You don't have to have that.
Yes.
That's correct. You don't have to have one or the other. And then here is where we could skip different filtering. So I can apply filtering, I can apply spam, I can apply policy rules. I wouldn't want to do this in this case because this is for cross-prem, my hybrid coexistence.
So I can specify domain without an IP.
Correct. Yeah, the question is, could I specify a domain without IP? The answer is yes, on an inbound. Yeah, you can have ranges, you could have specific IPs or not. For an outbound connector, remember this is how I'm going to get mail from my Exchange Online to my on-premise deployment. So I've named it the on-prem dogfood.com, builddogfood.com, and I'm going to say, hey, I only want mail to go to this IP address. I can use smart hosts, I can use FQDNs. This multi-SMTP profile is a way to mix IPs together. And then I decide what kind of connections I want to do. So I can, this is the enhanced TLS options. I can do it against a self-signed, against a valid. I can specify different domains if I want it to match whatever the sending domain is or the recipient domain, or if it's got to match a specific domain. Then once you create the connector, you have to actually apply it to your domain. So inside the FOPI Admin Center, this is just the company configuration, but I also have this domains. So the domains is all the domains that I accept mail for or that I want to configure inside of FOPI. So I have to then go into each domain. I could have on that first screen applied it to all my domains, but I'll just show you on this one. I actually have to go into the domain. I'm saying for this domain, this builddogfood.com, I want to add these connectors into it. So that's where I've added them. So I have a cloud user. So this is OA for my cloud user. I'm going to go ahead and send it to Exchange Online, if I can find my mouse. So I had the directories already configured. So I'll be able to just look in the gal. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my recipient right out of the gal. Or try to, there we go. And I have a recipient called on-prem that represents that on-prem user. You can see the builddogfood.com. I'll just say from Exchange Online, and I'll go ahead and send it. So back in my on-premise environment, I'll go ahead and log into OA here as well. I'm already logged in. So I'll see that the mail just arrived from the cloud, and I can see that cloud 1, it doesn't appear as an external recipient. I can click on that recipient. I can see that it's real. It looks like I don't have FreeBusy hooked up, but if I had FreeBusy, I would have it there. So it looks like a real internal recipient. And I'll go ahead and just open the message headers. So I could show you how many people out there actually look at message headers that often. Okay, good.
I wish we would resize the window.
Oh, I know. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The comment was, why is that window so small? I don't know. That's to keep Notepad in business, I guess. So we can go down and look at the headers. I can see that the SCL is a -1. That's the spam scanning. I can see that the auth mechanism is internal. So the mail, because we configure those connectors and we actually have these settings, it's part we didn't talk about, but to enable this rich coexistence, you have these, you have to configure remote domains. So inside of Exchange Online and on-premise, you have to say, hey, all mail for these domains, I'm going to go ahead and trust as internal. So you actually have, and I can just show you. This is a PowerShell console into my Exchange Online tenant, into my Exchange Online environment. So I can go ahead and look at remote domains. And I can see that my Bill dog food domain is configured as a remote domain. I'll just show you all the properties. So on this remote domain, I've configured it to trusted mail inbound enabled is true. So it says any mail that's for this domain, go ahead and accept it as enabled. And I've actually said this right here, this mail.exchange.microsoft.com is actually a certificate that I've used. I've gone ahead and I've added the certificate there as well and say any mail that's from these domains that matches these certificates, go ahead and accept it. This is the exchange part to make the mail look internal there. It already required, or it requires the FOPI side to have the mail secure there as well, because it will look at whatever headers are internal and actually promote them. FOPI will. It'll mark them as being from a trusted source so that Exchange can know if it should promote them or not. So we can save internal headers such as this organizational SCL header. So they'll be saved between the two environments. So I can go back to my OA and reply to this. And send it. So there it is. It came back from on-prem. On-prem, I can open up the user. It looks like it's internal as well. So both from on-prem environment, the cloud user looked internal, and from the cloud or Office 365, the on-prem user looked internal. I showed you the headers that showed you the mail was there, or that it was marked as being internal, so everything would be trusted. So the other thing that besides trusting it, it keeps the message formatting the same as well. So if you have rich content that's inside of the message, we'll keep it as TNF, and we'll go ahead and trust the message content. So if, say, you have embedded stuff in your on-prem environment, you don't want to have that lost between your on-prem or your cloud users. None of that's lost. All that's by configuring the connectors and by configuring the remote domains. Nothing is lost between the two.
Does that include IRM protected?
The question is, does that include IRM protected mail? I don't know. I don't know if it does. I don't think it does, but we'll have to try and find out for you. And in this case, I have the Exchange Online is accepting all my mail and decides if the recipient is internal or not. So mail from Hotmail, we're running out of time, but I could show you the mail from Hotmail or from the internet would be routed into FOPI, hit Exchange Online, would see Exchange Online didn't have the mailbox and actually route that over to on-prem. And that's the end of the demo. And that's the end of the presentation as well. I basically showed you the forced FOPI TLS enforcement. Those inbound connections, I showed you forced the inbound message to be TLS encrypted, and same with the outbound, we forced it. So that can apply to on-prem or not. The next session that got brought up, or the on-prem, is session or SIM 326, Microsoft Forefront End-to-End Protection for IW. It's in B312, if anybody's interested in that one. That's the end of the presentation. Are there any other questions about FOPI connectors or advanced routing with those connectors between on-prem, not on-prem?
Is there a catch-all capability, so that way if you have a lesser server, that you get AV and
So the question is there a catch-all? Do you want to be able to catch all mail for all recipients in your domain, whether or not they exist or not?
Most of it validates whether the end user has a mailbox in the chain or not. The majority of the concept is that the user has a mailbox there. The other concept would be having another domain like a listserv server service where it would still pass through. It get blatant, it get antivirus scanning by default, but it would also get blatant spam scanning.
So the
Connector on star.star get policy, apply policy and spam.
Yeah.
Okay. You can create an inbound connector with star.star.
yeah, you,
That should good.
and it's gonna allow all the mail to come in, but yeah.
To pass the edge, then only what you said and what Rafi said works.
No, if you're asking if it's going to validate if a recipient exists or not and still put it somewhere, we don't have the ability to just accept all mail for a domain, whether or not the recipient exists. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah, it would have to.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's an external mail system, and it's listserv.
Yeah.
And so it has multiple lists that reside on it. So it would have to pass it through just as an accepted domain, but not resolve it to a recipient mailbox, which is a pass-through domain.
Is it if the listserv or something is on-prem?
Yeah.
Or okay, yeah, so if you're just trying to route the mail outbound through floppy, it would go. We'd have no recipient type of.
Quarantine.
Yeah, it wouldn't be quarantined.
Because quarantine will only work if we figure out that it is spam and we are not 100% sure.
I want to have a good understanding of your question, so maybe we can just save it till after if there's any other questions about anything. No?
I have a question about with the Exchange 2010, the enterprise account provides all these protection, part of the enterprise account.
That's correct. You get floppy access with Enterprise Cal.
Okay, and so we are in the process of implementing this, but we want to kind of bypass the edge transfer service. So we could actually use the cloud for
That's correct. And that's what it's designed for.
internal. We have Exchange on premises.
That's right. So I think your question is, do you have to have Edge if you want to use floppy as your perimeter service? Because you don't require Edge, so you can just have your hubs. Yeah. The FPE, correct. So for internal mail, you could use FPE. That's correct. I'll have to verify about FPE coming with Enterprise Cal. I'm pretty sure it does, but at B312 would be able to answer that. The next session. Any other questions? The question is, can you sync 80 passwords with the quarantine? No. So I think you want to be able to have your end users just log right in to whatever and not maintain a separate login access. And there's no current way to do that. Exchange Online, if you're using quarantine, it's the same, but you could just be using your junk mail folders there. Yeah. There's no way with Exchange Online either. We don't sync. Nope, we do not. We can sync recipient objects, but we don't sync passwords for them. That's right. It has to be from a domain. The question is, can I put on my directory sync inside of Edge? It needs to be an AD joined. Yeah, it doesn't have a way to pull. Edge keeps its data in Atom or AD LDS. It doesn't have a way to pull from that. Yeah, totally. It doesn't have a way to look at Atom. That's the problem. Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.